And we're live on GMIHub tonight. I am Daryl with Cheryl and Andrew and Cal and Matt.
We are going to have such a great conversation with these gentlemen. Let me just briefly introduce you to them. We have all the way from Alberta, we have Andrew Potter. Andrew Potter is a tech director for Prairie College, and he is currently the owner of Uplift AVL, which is a business dedicated to help small and medium-sized churches with their AV systems, their design, and also some of the trainings. Thank you, Andrew, for being here with us.
Thanks.
And we have all the way from Saskatchewan, we have Matt Delon. I think I just put a French accent to your name. Sorry about that, Matt.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Matt is actually the tech director for Briarcrest, which is a college. Actually, it's a series of schools out there. Is that right? So there's a college, a seminary, some schools. Anyway, so with the Briarcrest organization, he is the tech director for their campuses. He's been there for 13 years, and I'm sure he has lots of stories to tell. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. And as we move further east, we have Calvin Roy. Calvin Roy is a 20-year veteran in the AV world, serving the corporate and I guess live event arena in the entertainment field. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And he is currently the VP of production and sales for Soundbox Productions, which is in Ontario, in the Hamilton region. So welcome, Cal.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
I guess we'll just start off with, does the church, or does the school or the church just say, hey, we're looking for equipment?
I guess in general, it's more like they know they want to do something, but most of the people that are asking don't know the equipment that's behind that or the expertise or anything like that. So they'll be like, oh, because of COVID, we need to live stream, or we need to step up our live stream game. And but that's generally from the people you talk to, that's usually as far as it goes. And then sort of up to me or whoever they're talking to sort of educate them on, like, well, what are your goals on this? And if we can nail down what you're trying to achieve, and we can tell you sort of what that's going to take to get there. And if those line up, then here's the equipment that you could be looking at getting to do that, and the kind of skills you would need to be able to run them. But it generally they have a broad idea of what they're looking for, and then need to have that discussion to try and figure out exactly what they're trying to achieve and what they're willing to put in, whether it's man hours or training or money, into achieving that goal.
Okay, Matt, what's your opinion or your position? Because I also know you were actually at a pretty big production company as well at one point that did installs. What was the position that you would go through when you're looking at purchasing, or when you were at position to sell?
Sure. I mean, for me, as tech director at a school, or if I was tech director at church, I always look to relationships that I have. That's a key thing for me with my suppliers and people I work with. I try to forge a good relationship with an AV supplier or an audio company or somebody. And, I get to know what they're all about, and I get to know, and I hopefully try and tell them what I'm all about, because I ultimately need them to understand what my mission is, what my vision is, the school's vision is. And the better I think those companies I work with or I'm looking for understand that vision and understand that mission, the better they're able to serve me, I think. And so that's for number one thing for me anyway. So trying to find a good connection with somebody that, works well.
Cal, what about you?
Yeah, well, from the provider standpoint, I mean, I get all kinds of emails with, and it varies. Some people know exactly what they're looking for. Some people have make and model of what they're looking for, and they're just looking for a price. Other folks say, our AV is terrible and we need to fix it. And that's, the rest is up to me. So, much along Matt's lines, I've been running the division at Soundbox now for 12 years, which is a little bit scary to think about. But it's never been about selling gear, because people can buy equipment anywhere. It's about finding solutions for people, and getting them to where they want to be. It's and that looks different for so many different reasons to so many different people. Sometimes it's budget driven, and how much can we squeeze out of this grate to get what they need. And other times it's vision driven, where here's what we want to do, how do we get there? And not to say budgets are unlimited, but they play a lesser role in some solutions. So it's definitely about getting to know the people behind who you're working with. And I mean, some of the smoothest integrations are the folks that have come back to us because we did a good job the first time, and we know what their next steps are because we've sort of set it up for them that way and with them that way. So yeah.
Okay. Matt actually made a statement of look for a good AV company that does installs to partner up. What would you look for in that situation? What makes a company better than another one? Because it's like you said, I can buy gear from anywhere. Is it a gear thing, or is it a people thing, or is it a training portion of it? Because you're putting an install in, are the people there able to do the to operate the gear? So what would you look for for a good install company then?
Well, like the people is probably the most important thing. Like you got to assume if you're calling a company that all they do is install AVL, they know how to do it. There's some that aren't, so I would definitely check into references on companies and hopefully you've worked with them before. But I would even say, like, if you have that kind of relationship with an AVL company, even if it costs a bit more to run with them, like if you have to get multiple quotes from other companies, I would spend more within reason to work with a company over and over again, because then they want, if you're going back to them, then like you were saying, you know what's there already. If you have that relationship, then you can go back and forth on stuff. And one of the things that I'm looking for when I'm dealing with a company is that they actually listen to my input. If I'm saying like, I want this and this is how I want to get there, and then they come back with a quote that has a bunch of equipment that doesn't match anything I said, it just feels more like, oh, this is the cookie cutter. Here's our live stream setup. We feel very comfortable with this, so here you go. But it doesn't actually meet or might not meet all of the requirements or my idea of how we were planning on running it. And there also needs to be some back and forth. So if you come up with an idea and go to a company with it and they go like, well, here's a good reason why you shouldn't do that, then that's also a really, really good relationship to have. But so if they just listen to exactly what you're asking for and don't ask any questions about it or tell you about what possible problems you're going to run into, that's also bad. But also just not listening to you also doesn't feel great to work with a company like that. So
Matt, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with what Andrew's saying there. In addition, I'd say, make sure if you're looking for a company to hang your hat with or to get into a longer term relationship with, I think Andrew said, check your references for sure. That's one thing. Find out what the company is all about. Make sure that the types of clients they've worked with kind of would fit with what you do too. So there's some AVL companies that focus entirely on the corporate market or on business or something like that. And while they might be able to do some church work, it might not be the right fit because they might not understand your real purpose. So guys like Soundbox, they're in the church market all the time. That might be a great fit. But so find someone that works in the realm that you're in, and check references. Most of these companies will give you, here, call this person and find out from them. Did you like your experience working with them? Find that kind of stuff. So, and
as an integrator, Cal, are there churches that you wouldn't work with? Or sorry, I shouldn't say churches. Are there situations where you would go no due to the fact of dealing with people issues or just not compatible with what's going on?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you obviously in a business sense, we never want to turn away an opportunity. But I've certainly gotten close to firing a couple of clients just because um, the communication wasn't there. It was one-way communication, right? It was, you know, us trying to explain why we couldn't do something that they were asking, or why we couldn't do what they were asking cheap enough. And it just wasn't being received. And thankfully, I think we've managed to work through with most of our customers. We've got a great, I mean, our customers are awesome. But yeah, there's certainly pops up times where, as much as the relationship from the customer side needs to be a cohesive one, as an integrator, you're really not going to put your best foot forward if you don't feel like the customer respects what you do, either, or um, yeah, or appreciates what you do. Like I said, we're always trying to find the best solution, and we get, it doesn't happen very often, thankfully, but we do get the some clients, and not just churches, it happens all over, where you give them a quote that's fair and in line with pricing kind of across the board, and then they come back, well, is that your best price? Where it's like, yeah, we're not trying to rip anybody off. We're trying to give fair value, and that value isn't necessarily represented in the lowest dollar price. It's how much are you going to need to fix this after we've helped you. There's a lot of companies that are I shouldn't say a lot. There are companies that are cheaper to work with, but then the end solution, you end up doing the whole thing over again, or for whatever reason that communication wasn't there. So I mean, it happens. I don't think it happens too much, hopefully, and I hope there's nobody out there going, yeah, we had that experience with Soundbox, because most of our experience is pretty positive, and word of mouth has been our best, our best kind of engagement with people. I love it when people come and say, oh, hey, I was talking to so and so, and they had a good experience with you guys, so we thought we'd check you out. So but it's got to be two-way. It's got to be a mutual respect, I think, or it's just not going to work, like any kind of relationship.
So now the fact that, okay, we got some gear installed, or as you're working at putting gear in, does it matter who's the operator going to be? Like churches, most of them are volunteer based.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are actually have paid staff and multiple paid staff to work. With Matt and Andrew, you've got students and paid staff as well. How does that affect with what you're looking for and wanting to do? Would you put in the top of the line video audio gear because they might have the budget to do it, or would you say it's too complicated?
You certainly, I mean, one of my first questions typically is, who's going to be operating, what's your user base, and what's their level of comfort with what we're looking at. Because there's certainly some advanced systems you can do when someone asks you for a solution, but you definitely have to take that into account. So I think that, gauging, I mean, there's certain brands that I'll steer away from if the user base is fairly novice, not because they're not good gear, but because the learning curve is a bit steeper than maybe some of the other product that's available that can accomplish the same job. At some point, it's sort of like shopping for a car. Which one do you like the best, and which one has the features that suit you? It's not so much about, oh, this one's so much better than the other one. It just becomes an application thing. So yeah, definitely asking who's going to be using it. We talk about video streaming systems have been probably our number one focus, just with the demand these days. And it varies so much. I mean, it can be someone coming to us and saying, hey, we're streaming from our iPhone and we'd like to improve that. And you go, okay, well, are you looking for just a better signal overall? You're happy with a single shot? Or are we looking at moving to multiple shots and integrated audio and that whole thing, right? And the response there varies too, right? You've got folks that may not have a very deep volunteer pool, so they need something that maybe one person can run and operate, but they also maybe want more than just a static shot. So you find the workarounds and what works best for those folks.
So kind of the same question to you, Matt. As you're looking to buy equipment, do you keep a a thought process on the students that are going to be operating, or the staff that's going to be operating, or is it just like, this is budget and we're going to get the best quality that we can get?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a balance of a lot of different things. It's a balance of who's the intended user. You know, in my case, I've got everything from high school kids right up to grandparents touching the gear. So I got to find something in some cases that fits all of them. You know, it sadly, but that's true. So I got people that are fresh and new and don't understand what the gain knob on the top of the auto console does, and others that, you know, have used it for 40, 50 years. So I'm trying to find something that's going to work for a large audience. I'm also thinking about budget for sure. I mean, that one's come up a couple times in conversation. You know, church budgets, school budgets, they're not always massive. So you got to find the right tool at the right price that fits the need. And the need's probably the biggest one. What do you need the thing to do? Like, does it need every feature under the sun, every new bell and whistle? Or do you just need core competency or core things that you know, get the job done, kind of thing. So it's a balance. You pick and choose pieces of equipment and brands to find the right piece of reliable gear. Pardon me. And, you know, what's reliable for you? How long do you need it to last? Yeah, a lot of different things, but definitely a balance for me.
What about yourself, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. It's the nice thing is a lot of the newer gear that is coming out now, it seems to be more like a lot more work seems to be put into the UI and like how easy it is to operate. There's a learning curve on everything. But yeah, some pieces of gear do have quite the steep learning curve. But yeah, a big thing is just, budget, like how much money do I have to do this? And then, I do think about the user base, but there's like one term that always comes up whenever someone's on like the Facebook pages. They'll be like, oh, is it volunteer friendly? And I hate that term because before I moved out here, I was actually a volunteer firefighter for about 11 years. And the difference between my training as a volunteer and a full-time firefighter was zero. I had the same training and I had to deal with the same stuff. So a volunteer can learn like the same level. It's just dependent on how much time they're going to put into it, how much time you can put into it. So for the most part, anything that's fairly new, they go about things different ways, but they're all pretty teachable. But yeah, it'll be a mix of like, how much money do I have and what goals am I trying to achieve? And then try and find that mix there. And if I do find something and it's like, oh, this seems like it's going to be really complicated to run, then yeah, I'll move on, try and find something that can tick all the same boxes, but be easier to operate.
I was just going to jump in, but I don't want you to forget your thought. Hold that thought, okay?
Hold on.
I just wanted to jump in and just say to everyone who's just tuning in right now, you're watching Studio Talk right now, and we are talking with Andrew Potter, all the way from Alberta, Matt DeLong from Saskatchewan, and Kelvin Roy from Ontario. All of them are tech directors, and they're talking about, I'll say the philosophies behind the technical gear that's given to different organizations, as well as thinking of the user base, thinking about the volunteers in particular, and what's the philosophy behind that. So, Cal, I hope I didn't make you forget your point. State your point.
All right. I was going to say, from a supplier end, one thing that we base some of our decisions on is manufacturer support and distribution support. So what kind of, who are our strong manufacturers and who are our strong distributors, that when something happens, because technology inevitably will fail to some degree at some point, how quickly can we turn around a solution for the end user? Does it come out of inventory that we stock as a rental house that we can quickly sub in something so that the church or whoever it is stays, operational? Or can I lean on a supplier to say, hey, I've got a piece that's failed. Can you send me a replacement while we get this one repaired? So that's one that often the customers don't really worry about, because it's not, the onus is on us as a supplier to help provide that support, right? So, manufacturer support and distribution support.
Yeah, and that often doesn't line up with whatever the cheapest piece of gear you could fit into that.
No,
But I've also seen it the opposite, where the high-end gear, you can never get the stuff because they
Yeah.
only make 3 or 4 of them, and they should never break.
Yeah, they
They
have
already
one
put the
tech and
redundancies in.
he lives in Europe, so.
So
yeah, and
you,
I'll say to Cal's point there, I totally agree with that one. And for me, especially, that piece is an important one in terms of reliability, or who's going to be able to support it. Is I work and live in a rural area of Saskatchewan. And if any of you have been to Saskatchewan before, there's not much around. So for me to get a hold of something when it breaks usually means 2 to 3 days, or something like that, even from the best suppliers or best sources. So it's actually on me usually right now to make sure I have a secondary piece of equipment that'll stand in. So I might have to buy 2 of something just to be sure I've got a backup or something running along. So
interesting. So I'm going to just take a little bit, because we were talking philosophies, being at the schools and working in the churches. Do you believe that it should be button pushers versus knowing what you're doing and why you're doing for your volunteers? I saw Matt's face. I wanted.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I was gonna say, like, there's certain circumstances where it's more of a button pusher mentality. Just for like, a good example would be in a school, be working with faculty in classroom systems. It's there we try to design, or we've just actually implemented some new stuff. It's very complicated on the back end, but it's designed so that it can just be, push this button and you're good to go. But from the more of the production side for like our chapels and events that we have, or even at my church, my philosophy is more of the how and the why. I'd rather they know what this is doing, because then if something goes wrong, they can actually fix it. If you go like, oh, just turn this up, and then they turn it up and then they get feedback, then they just look panicked. And it's because they have no idea why that's happening. Or someone comes up and says like, oh, the live stream is really, really quiet, and they don't have any understanding of gain structure, then they're not going to know why. Oh, it's super loud in the house, but why would it be quiet online then? So yeah, I'm a big fan. Before I came here to Prairie, I was actually living in Sexsmith, Alberta, which is near Peace River Bible Institute, and they actually had me teach an audio course there, an audio 101 course. And my first couple of classes was actually on like just the science behind sound, just so they would understand what was actually happening, because you can't see it. So I scared off a few people apparently, because they're like, oh, he's talking about science at a Bible college now. So they weren't expecting the inverse square law to make an appearance. So, but yeah, I think if you can, one, get someone to stick around through that, then you end up, it might take a bit longer to get them to a point where that you can just sort of let them go. But you end up with someone is way more useful, in the sense that like, I don't have to be like at my church, I don't have to stand at the back of the tech booth if I'm not scheduled to be on that week, because I'm confident that the video guys know what they're doing, and the audio guy knows what he's doing, and the pro presenter guy knows what he's doing, or person. But yeah, I'd rather they understand how whatever they're working on works, and then yeah, they can run it confidently. And then if something new comes up, then they know all the tools, so then they can move forward from there and actually just come up with new solutions. And if you keep them around long enough, then they might start teaching you stuff, because you just taught them the base layer, and then they started going off on their own, and you're like, oh, you could actually do something like this, and then you end up learning more back towards you that way. So yeah. Big
Yeah,
fan.
I'd have to agree with Andrew. Soundbox, my main focus is what we kind of dub the live event sort of spaces. So, churches, theaters, auditoriums, that kind of thing. But we have a division that deals with boardrooms and business clientele. And the approach there was totally different. If you've got a CEO who walks into his boardroom and he has to go through 19 steps to make it work, you're fired. You're done. Like, get me someone new who can make this work at the push of one button. So much to Andrew's point, it's super complicated on the back end, but he or she can walk into that boardroom, and at the push of a button, his conferencing system works, and he can plug his laptop in and it goes to the screen and that whole deal. If I've got an hour with a volunteer technician at a church, that hour, I feel, and it's happened, has been best spent walking them through their console and showing them what each thing does and the concept behind it. Because I've been mixing audio for the better part of 20 years, and I still learn stuff every time I mix. So to think that you're gonna get them to the end of how to mix audio in an hour is not gonna. That's a growth track that's super long. But if you can teach them how their equipment works and why it reacts the way it does, and the cause and effect behind it, then they can practice that and grow in that till they're teaching you stuff, like Andrew said.
Matt, I saw your face when I first asked that. I want to hear your thoughts.
Oh, I think Andrew stole it. It's the right answer, right, for sure. Yeah, I think there's definitely a balance to it. You have to teach the how and the why. People need to understand what's going on in the back end of an audio console or signal flow or the science of it. Same with lighting or video. Pick the topic, but they've got to understand the background. Got to understand what an iris does to get a good camera shot, or why lighting is important, or something like that. Just to say, oh, just hit the red buttons, that'll turn the mic on and go. That doesn't work. It can in a pinch, but the volunteer is not going to really be able to perform their best.
I'm very curious because thinking about volunteers, especially in a church setting, for example, some churches or some tech teams have the mindset that, well, I'm only a volunteer, so just tell me what buttons to press. But then the irony behind it is that those are the same people that everyone else looks to fix a technical problem, especially if the pastor is speaking or the worship team is playing. And it's like, how do you work with volunteers that may say, well, just tell me what buttons to push and I'll know that I know I'm a pro. I'm the king of the buttons. How do you deal with that? Do you find you have to convince them that they need to know more than the red button is what turns on the microphone?
It's definitely a culture thing. If you want a group of volunteers that want to own what they're doing and get better and do well, you need to create a culture that'll foster that. And part of it, like training them on the how and why, helps with that, because then they feel more like not was a fader monkey, was a term I've seen before. Just, slide it up and down. I know actually during my interview here, I was asked like what thing I hate the most in like tech wise in like church or whatever. And mine was church. A lot of churches will end up setting up people to fail almost. They'll give them no training, no support, and then something goes wrong, and then they're the person that's at fault. And it's like it's been a few years, but it's still, tech in church is still pretty new. We've gotten worship teams down pretty good. We just happen to have musicians that go to our church and they practice on their own time and like do this for fun or for work on the side. But the odds of a church having an audio engineer or a video director who just happens to go to their church and wants to volunteer their time there is less likely. So if like your church is having these problems, then like you need to stop thinking of like your tech guy as just, oh, he's the guy that turns everything on, and more of like how they can be a part of the whole system, and then definitely give them some support through like training or just even listening to their ideas on some stuff and actually taking input from them so they feel less like a cog in the system and more like they're, like I said, owning their little portion there.
Yeah, it's important to invest. I think, Matt touched on that. And if there's any leaders that tune into this, invest in your people and don't bring someone in to train under the guise of, oh, they're coming to fix it, because that puts your people in a negative light, right? Your volunteers are working tirelessly for you. They're doing their best. Like I said, I've been fortunate to be in this industry and mix audio and mix bands and do that kind of thing for a long time. But there was a point in my career where I was doing that every single night. Now, put me behind a console once a month, I'm probably going to be, pretty rusty. So in the same way of volunteers, if you've got a rotation in your church that you have 4 audio people or video or lighting, and you're expecting them to remember everything to do with your system, and their only exposure to that is that one Sunday out of a month, then there's got to be some grace there. So yeah, any training, not bring it under the guise of, hey, well, we're pretty rough here, so we got to fix it. It's, what, we appreciate what you're doing, and let's invest in you so that we can all grow together.
But and the opposite side of that, you do need buy-in from your volunteers as well. Absolutely. If they have that attitude is like, oh, I'm the master button pusher and I don't need to know any more about this, it works fine. It's not a good person to have on your team, and you'll end up losing other people that could be way more beneficial, because it's just not a fun person to work with. So it does sometimes involve, and I'm bad at this too because I hate conflict, but it does sometimes involve talking to people about their attitude. And if, like I said, if you build that, this is the culture where we're trying to go, and if they don't match up with it, having those conversations about like, do you want to do this, or would it work better if you tried in a different position, because we're trying to go this way and you're sort of not wanting to move with us here. So finding that balance on both sides of we have to be able to support the techs, but the techs also have to sort of buy into whatever direction you're trying to go.
That makes sense. Okay, so then that brings me to this question. A volunteer that wants to do tech, can anybody do it? Like, is there
a requirement to be a tech?
I'll jump in. In my case, I mean, I'm happy to take anyone on my teams, with a few qualifications. I like people to be teachable. I like people to be dependable. Like, you got to know that if you call them in for 9 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning to do a sound check, they're going to show up. But I also want to know that they're on board with what we're trying to do, with the mission of the school, with the mission of the event, or whatever it is, what the purpose is. If they're on board with all those things, and they're teachable and dependable, I'm game. Like, technical aptitude, that's like several down the list for me. It's great if they've got an aptitude for tech in some way, whether it's, computers or audio or video or something, but it's not one of my top few. I've had plenty of students that I've worked with in the past, who my favorites in some cases, they had no technical aptitude whatsoever. They just wanted to get involved and serve. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You can teach almost anyone most of the tech stuff. And if you do run to the point where like they're not getting that technical aptitude, then you can find another place for them. But like, that's a great person to have on your team, and like they're not getting audio, and it's like, well, and here's lighting, or here's video, or here's Pro Presenter, or there's other places that they can go. But yeah, a great attitude is probably the top, and like being open to being taught. The worst people I've ever dealt with were ones that were technically had good aptitude for technical skills, but didn't want to learn anything new. So.
Okay, so the other question I was going to ask, we talked about the volunteers. Now, what about a volunteer leader? A person that's supposed to sort of, so to speak, the acting technical director over over a set of volunteers that are going to be running the AV. What kind of aptitude should that person have? Any different from other volunteers?
I would say they would need to be, qualities of a good leader are someone that can obviously encourage people, to bring them along for the ride, to build them up and to share knowledge. I mean, some of the worst situations I've been in is where, you walk into a facility and one person knows everything to do with everything, but they won't share the knowledge with other people. And it usually comes out of a territorial thing, a fear of losing their position. But the reality is they're cutting their own selves out, and they're destroying their team. I've got a friend who worked as a technical director in a small church out in Windsor. Minimal budget, but they did great things with their budget, and rose to a lot of occasion. And if you kind of viewed them from the outside as far as live streaming and web content, you'd think they were a much bigger facility. He got an opportunity to come to a larger church in Oakville, and he called me up and he's like, I think I'm in over my head, but do you think I can do this? And my response was, I think the fact that you're asking the question, can you do it? And that that you might be biting off a little bit more than you can chew from your technical knowledge. I said, you've got my support, you've got Soundbox's support, you've got people you can call. If they're just looking for a leader, you don't need to know the answers to every single question, but you have to know enough that you don't know to ask someone else and to bring in experts where you need them, to lean on other people. So, having, I guess, a bit of humility and being humble enough to know sort of where your limitations are, and being able to build up the team around you and encourage and excite people as to the vision of where the church or whatever is going.
In light of COVID, how has, I'm hearing the different the philosophies, because I've also seen pre-COVID a little bit of difference in then compared to what you're talking about now. So your answers right now, is it based on the fact that because COVID is here, so there's more of a stronger emphasis for team leaders or tech leaders to be, to be open to being leaders, not necessarily experts, but leaders, the need for communication, the need for just being teachable, correctable. Like, is that just a stronger emphasis now because of COVID and because more churches and organizations are heading towards the live streaming, or it's now become more of a necessity? Do you find that it's stronger emphasis on these philosophies?
I think one of the things from COVID that sort of happened is it's shone a light on some problems that people have been having, or like if you didn't have that strong team or strong backbone there, then now if your church isn't meeting in person, then you could possibly, we lost a few volunteers because I think they just sort of felt like they didn't want to be doing it anymore anyway, but they felt like they needed to keep volunteering because they were going to the church. But now then, we're not meeting anymore. And we sort of had a break where it was more held, everything was done by staff, just because we're pre-recording everything. And then when we go back to live, and it's like, I think I'll stay off, because they had that chance to not be a part of it. So I think in some places, if you didn't have that leadership there or whatever, a lot of people, there might be some people who have seen it as an opportunity to I can get out of this without hurting anyone's feelings, or and so the stresses that this has put on everyone's teams has sort of pointed out some of the weak points that are in anyone's teams. So it's we definitely changed a few things on how we run it and who we're trying to connect with volunteer wise, and how we deal with them. But yeah, I think across the board, just with COVID, it's pointed out how important these aspects are compared to just having someone who just knows everything and isn't a great leader.
COVID's like the sifter. It's like sifting the people out and going, those who are good are going to stay in the sift. Everyone else just falls through,
Yeah.
Do you, Calvin, and Matt, do you feel the same way? Is it do you find that because of COVID, all of these different philosophies that you're expressing right now, and the needs for leaders to be certain ways and volunteers to be certain ways, is it more stronger now because COVID has kicked in and there's a stronger need for technology to be at the forefront?
I was going to say the need for technology, became apparent overnight, and most every church needed to become a broadcast studio to some degree overnight. Yeah. So, and you had some people who were sort of ready for it, maybe halfway there, maybe it was on the radar, maybe it was on the roadmap. And then you had others who were totally not even thinking about streaming their services to the internet. Like it just was a foreign concept to them. And that the need for that and to keep engaged with their people has, like Andrew said, has shone a light on the need for technology, which, maybe in the past, if you're a live streaming church, if you're maybe a smaller church or even a bigger church, maybe you had one or two strong technicians, but in those other weeks, maybe you limped by and it wasn't really a big deal because people still came, and, the in-person experience was still pretty good and the preaching was good and all that kind of stuff. Well, the trouble with broadcast is if it's not executed well, it's bad. I mean, it's terrible, right? If things aren't turned up in the audio mix, you don't hear them at all. There's no forgiveness like there is in a live situation. So yeah, now if you didn't build yourself a good team, or you weren't a good leader that could bring and engage people, you're left doing it week after week after week after week, and then you're seeing burnout. People are going, man, I can't do this all the time. I need more people, but they haven't engaged those people, so they're trying to get, I think it's definitely shone a light. And I mean, it's not an isolated incident. I mean, the COVID's kind of shone a light on a lot of weaknesses, but it's certainly, I feel, from what I've seen, it certainly brought out, the need for more people and that kind of thing. Even I'm associated with a small church here in Hamilton, or relatively small church, and what went from a single AV person running sound and lyrics and that kind of thing, now we're looking at, we just made a call for volunteers, and we're looking at having a weekly rotation of a 3-person team, one for live broadcast mix, one for in-house audio, and one for visuals. So, and camera switching. So it, even in a smaller body, we're having to expand that. So it's widespread for sure.
So it's an opportunity based on that example, it's basically an opportunity for teams like this to grow.
Yep.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Matt, what's your experience? What's your take on that?
I think, like everyone said, COVID has changed a few things for churches and for ministries, and there's definitely a need for them to stretch their skills, like I think we've talked about, and grow their teams for sure. I think in terms of the leadership aspect we were talking about a little bit earlier, it might be more apparent now than ever in some areas, but I think the need for a strong, competent leader has always been there. Maybe we didn't see it or didn't see it as well. Some churches did for sure, but I think that leadership piece is really important always, and has been for years. And there's some churches that have excelled in building teams that have worked really well, and others that haven't in some ways. And that's on the leadership for sure in some cases.
Do you think it's wise that onstage people learn tech stuff?
Personally, I do. Yeah. Yeah, I teach, while I'm teaching the techs, the right alongside them, I'm teaching the worship teams and the musicians. And, if they don't know how to use that microphone or hold it properly or even plug it in, they're getting taught that for sure. It helps out the technicians. They don't have as much work to do, but ultimately, increasing everyone's knowledge of the how and the why is important. Singers can't sing well into a microphone if they don't know the physical properties of how the sound travels and how the microphone receives that. So
that's where the inverse square law comes in on that one. But yeah, it's the same thing as the big one that you'd see that we had here quite a bit is like, oh, just keep turning up the monitor, turn it up, and it's like, oh, now we have feedback. And it's just like explaining if your worship team or your artists understand how that all works. It's like, well, if you sing closer to the mic, can gain it down, there's less chance of that feedback happening. We can get it to the level you want. But if you're going to stand 4 inches away from the microphone, like there's some laws of physics that we can't overcome with a fancier console. So yeah, it's definitely, I mean, they don't need to know everything, but yeah, definitely having them have a basic understanding of the tools they're using. Like if you ask an electric guitarist about their guitar and their amp, they're going to have some pretty deep opinions on it, more than likely. But then they're singing into a microphone and they don't know how a sound system works. The more they can learn about that, the just overall, the better that they'll be at that skill. So
I think understanding the limitations too. Whatever the system is, it's going to have limitations, right? So if the artist, the worship team, whatever you want to call it, is on the platform, understands what the system can and can't do, then they're not going to ask for things. They may not ask for things that that their engineers can't deliver for them, and then they don't get frustrated. I mean, the worst thing, and I've seen it happen, is where, you know, an artist is asking for this, asking for this, asking for this, and rather than, you know, maybe the communication isn't quite clear that the system can't do it. It's not that the engineer doesn't want to provide for them. It's not that they're not trying to provide for them, but they just, you know, we've hit that threshold. And then people just get frustrated. And I mean, that communication is clincher there. But, and, you know, for an artist to be able to communicate to a little, you know, again, like the guys have said, they don't need to know the whole breadth of it, but if they can communicate a little bit in the same terminology and language that the audio engineer or the, you know, whatever the case may be, is operating in, it helps and makes things a little bit easier, that's for sure.
Yeah, I like your comments about that shared language piece. That's a big one. You know, having the techs who like to talk in, you know, hertz and decibels, and the worship team just going, it sounds funny,
more purple,
or it sounds like I'm in a can. Like, you can help your techs and your worship teams work together better, your artists or whoever it is, if they can develop some sort of a shared language. Like when I say I sound like I'm in a can, what does that mean for the technician? Or I sound too hissy, what's that mean? Or you know, can't hear myself. Well, maybe it's just that it's not bright enough or something. Like, shared language is a huge piece to working between the stage and the console. So.
Yeah, especially now, like one of the newer technologies the last few years that have been creeping in is like personal mixers for in-ear monitors. You're now asking the people on stage to be mixers, like audio engineers, and they may not see it that way, and then they're like, oh, this sounds terrible. And it's like, well, you couldn't quite hear yourself, so you turned yourself up louder, but then you couldn't hear the piano again, so you turned that up. But you could have solved it by just turning the bass down or the electric guitar down or doing some slight EQ changes. And so if you're gonna start implementing technology, like you can't just throw it at them, or even like the apps on phones, and you're like, oh, you can make your own in-ear mix. And it's like, it's great technology, especially if you're doing like monitors from front of house. It frees up a lot of time and energy, but you do need to work with them because they don't a lot of times have any experience with this stuff, and then they're just going to end up resenting this technology or even you for bringing it in. And so if you can train them on that stuff and bring stuff in slowly and make sure that they're comfortable with the technology that's coming in, then they'll be behind you on it. And that helps with getting stuff later down the line if the whole tech or the whole worship team is like, oh yeah, the stuff that he's been buying has been awesome.
Yeah, just when you said that, I was just imagining a whole worship team with the inner ears, and some of them blaming you because they're half deaf because they kept turning everything up. Like, yeah. That's kind of what I'm hearing right now. You know, this is all good. Like I'm almost like, I know we're 10 minutes out here, and again, audience, if you are just tuning in right now, we have been just talking about tech. We've been talking about volunteers. We've been talking about tech teams. We're talking about the philosophies behind all of this, and especially how COVID is kind of filtering its way and what it's doing, what its place has been with tech teams now and volunteer teams right now, and even the choice of equipment right now, because the need for technology has skyrocketed as much as it has. If you are just tuning in, know that this is being recorded, but feel free to share the experience. The link is right here as well. Just know that you can also, if you like this, please like it and subscribe, press the button, subscribe, ring the bell, because there are other great videos that are going to be coming on like this. We're here every Monday with new information and new panelists. And again, we are here with Andrew Potter, Matt DeLong, and Calvin Roy, all of them tech directors from right across Canada. And they're sharing their experiences, as a couple of them are with schools and a lot of them have worked with churches. So church leaders, I hope you're tuning in on this. So I want to break down into kind of a summary. We've talked about so many different things from the point of equipment as well as a point of volunteers, but I want to summarize it because it's like everything got, so much information got mentioned. So if we can go back to equipment, okay? Because of the way, again, I'm going to tie this in with COVID because it's relevant, right? So because of the way COVID is right now, if there are, we've talked about someone gave the example of a situation where people weren't ready for being online. And obviously they had to scramble to get online, but if they wanted to improve what they were doing, what type of equipment, like what type of equipment would you recommend for them, assuming that their team is relatively new at the their experience is as far as like from March 2020 of learning how to use technology? What would you recommend? What kind of systems would you recommend for those kind of situations?
How much time did you say we had? You know what, it comes down to whatever you're going to do, whatever that first step is or second step, in my humble opinion, make sure that it is offering good quality. So, you know what, if all you have is an iPhone or an iPad or something like that at your disposal for a camera, make sure you spend $150 and get yourself an audio interface designed to work with that, so that your audio isn't being pulled from the microphone on the camera. You can actually feed some sort of audio mix from an audio mixer. If you're at the next stage and you've got a bit of budget, start with, don't necessarily try and hodgepodge together 2 or 3 cameras. Start with a really good camera and make sure you've got adequate lighting. It's those small steps. Putting out whatever you're going to broadcast or put out, making sure it's done to the top quality that you can afford, whatever that looks like. And there's so many solutions available. There's so many different ways to package it. Just making sure that whatever is going out into the interwebs is of good quality, and audio is clear. You can actually see the people on the other end of the camera, and it's putting forth a good representation of who you are as a church, what you're doing, and what you're all about.
Excellent. Those are great considerations. Matt and Andrew, do you have anything to add to that in terms of considerations for using this scenario, a church that just basically since March 2020 just had to get their way into to streaming their services, and their team has only learned tech from 2020 of March? What are some other considerations you would have for them?
If you're not sure like what kind of equipment would be best fit in there, I would suggest finding a really good integrator and talking to them. And what I would do before that step would be find examples. Like all the churches are streaming online now, so that you can just find a few of them. I did this with my church when I wanted to find out what they wanted to achieve. And I found a church that just had a static camera at the back, and then another one that had a bunch of PDZs that they could remote control, but it was all static shots, and then more of like a standard broadcast. And then you go up to like Red Rocks or Bethel, where it's more cinematic. You can find these examples now really easily on YouTube. If you go through that and decide, okay, this is what I want to like achieve, talk to an integrator, show them like this is what you're trying to go for, and then they can sometimes give you a reality check if it's dependent on like we want to do Red Rocks and we have $1,000. It's like, well, it's not going to happen. But here's like some directions you could go in. So yeah, it's really important to find a good integrator, but also just really nail down what you're trying to achieve, because then those higher price tags make more sense and they're not as scary. If you go, I want to do this, and they're like, okay, well, it's going to cost, X amount of dollars, and you go, okay, we can do that. That price tag is attached to an idea of what it can achieve, as opposed to, we need a video system. It's like, oh, well, that's going to cost you, $120,000. And it's like, well, that's way too much. So we're just not going to do it. Or we're just going to, John said he could give us a camera for $30 or whatever. So I think the biggest thing is like, figure out what you want to do. And if you're not sure what it takes to get there, find someone who does, and then sort of figure out if the cost involved with that in manpower and money and training is equal to what you guys want to put into it to achieve that, or if you can adjust your expectations and build something that fits more into your budget or the people that'll be running it.
Great points. Matt, anything to add to that?
No, I think both those guys got great answers to that. The only thing I'd add would be don't think you have to go all the way right at the start. Like Cal said, focus on what that first step is and try and get the best quality you can. And like Andrew said, know what your vision or your end game is, what your goal is, and what steps can you take, little pieces along the way to get there. So maybe it's just that one camera that looks really good to start, and the next step might be a second camera for that extra angle. Just figure out what it is that's going to get you to that end goal, but focus on the end goal and then start where you can. So.
And out of curiosity, when you talk about that, do you mean, is the end goal or the best solution usually the latest and greatest, or is it not?
For me, it's what's appropriate to you in your situation. So what's appropriate for your church or your band, if you're an artist or whatever it is. What's your brand look like? Like, what is it you as a church want to be represented like online, or as you as an artist? How do you want to be seen online? You can find countless examples, like Andrew said, of different churches or different people online doing their thing. Is there one that resonates with you? Is there one that resonates with your people most, or who's going to be watching? Because if you're at it for outreach, that'll look completely different than if you're just in it to serve the people in care homes that can't come to your building right now, that are stuck inside and just want to tune in to the same church they've been going to for 4 years. Those are two completely different looks and goals. So figure out what your leadership needs to do and what the goal is, and then just work towards it.
Excellent. And now, 3 things related to the teams and team leaders. What are some, you've said a lot, all of you, but I just want to get a nice quick summary. If you had 3 points that you would say a team lead, a tech team leader, or the tech volunteers should have in terms of their characteristics to make a good team. And this is in light of, because of COVID, teams have an opportunity to grow right now. What are the 3 characteristics that you would say would help a team grow and be more successful, especially at a time that we are in right now?
Teachable. I think we all agreed on that one that came up for me. So yeah, teachable. Communication's a huge one for me. I before we went live, I was joking around that I feel like I've been called in to do trainings or that were more turned into, sessions of sorting out people's issues with each other and trying to figure out a way to nicely tell someone something someone else has felt for a while. So communication is huge for any team. And I think we can all agree. I mean, the technical aptitude is a great one to have, but it's not the highest on the priority list. I think if you're going to be a successful audio engineer, you should probably have a somewhat tuned ear and have an idea of what music should sound like, or that's probably goes without saying. But the tech side of it can be taught to anyone really who's willing to learn. I've had some highly unlikely candidates in some churches that I wasn't sure that they were going to be the star of the class, and lo and behold, here they were, kind of blowing by everybody just because they were open to knowledge and they just kind of jumped on board. So.
That was like me in drumming, but I won't go into that right now. Andrew, Matt, any thoughts on what you would say, what characteristics, key characteristics for a successful tech team, tech leader? What are some of those things in addition to what Calvin said?
Oh, now you've added addition. That's going to be harder. I was just going to say it's basically what he said. Yeah, like relationships, like your ability to have relationships with people and is probably one of the biggest things. It's odd saying that as like a tech person. It's usually the introvert that likes to hide at the back. But if you're going to be the one in charge, like you need to have a really good relationship with the worship team and the pastors and stuff, because like you need to bring their vision out, so you need to know what it is. So having a great relationship with them, then that gets you to a point where you can communicate with them. So telling them like, oh, that guitar tone doesn't actually sound that great. If you can't say that to them, and then they'll take it poorly, you have a bad relationship with them. It's not going to go well. So generally you just don't do anything. So if you have a good relationship, you can tell them like, this doesn't sound great in this circumstance. Can we adjust that? Or they can tell you that something isn't working for them. Then just overall, if you know that no one's trying to hurt each other's feelings, you can create a much better product at the end, less problems, and just overall the quality goes up. And then I would just say, just as a leader, just being able to remain calm in a stressful situation is pretty important. But yeah, it's the odd thing, I think, is just that, like we've all sort of said, it is technical capabilities are important, but they're definitely under more of the relational aspects of it, and even just being willing to learn from others. So just know what you don't know, so you can find the people that do know what that is. It's better than having one person who just knows everything. If you can just find the person who knows how to fix it, then you can get them to do it and delegate. Then you don't have to be there every time something turns on. So
yeah, and I think I completely agree with everything the guys here are saying, and I think to the leadership or the technician, I'd say, especially right now, make sure you care for your people. So if you're a tech leader, care for your people, know what's going on in their lives. Know you don't have to worry about the tech stuff more right now. Worry about how your people are doing. Are they the ones that are pulling the 24-hour overnighter before church on Sunday to get the video up online? Are they that one person that has to do all the work? Find them some help, maybe. How's their family doing? Know those kind of things about your people. I had one seasoned technician one time tell me that they never wanted to be the person that would have to go up to that guitar player to say, hey, something's wrong with your tone, unless they knew the name of the guy's dog and their kids and what grade they were in. So, know your people is probably the big one. Know where they're at, how they're feeling about COVID. Do they even want to be in the room serving on Sunday, or would they rather be at home? Because some people are concerned about it, some aren't, but it just depends what each person has. So, but yeah, knowing the people's good, relationships key, all that kind of thing.
That's great. I don't know, Daryl, if you have anything you'd like to add.
I think that's really good for tonight.
You think that's really good?
Yeah.
Okay. He's the boss. So
I know.
I want to say thank you guys. Andrew, Matt, Calvin, it was so wonderful to have you on board to share your thoughts and share your experiences. All the best to you during this COVID time. I don't know if you guys are shut down like we are in our areas. And I hope you don't have to be as shut down as we are, but but thank you so much for taking the time out of your days to just be with us and again to share. And thank you, audience, for being with us. I'm hoping that what you heard here you've learned a lot. And if you do want to hear more from these guys or learn more about where they're working and what they're all about, we will put their websites in the description below when this video kind of turns over. So we will look at that. We also wanted to remind you that October 30th was a big day because we launched our GMIHub Family Christmas album. And thank you to all those who have gone to gmihub.bandcamp.com to go get your version and your copy to get your shopping done early for Christmas. But you know what? There's still more downloads available for you. So please, please, please go and visit gmihub.bandcamp.com and listen to the songs. And this is a great way to support the Canadian gospel music industry. That's what this was. That's what that was about. And it was so awesome that these artists that got together and created original music, original Christmas music to add to your collection of favorites. So go ahead and check that out. You can always, if you have any questions, go to our website, gospelmusicindustryhub.com. And again, if you're here on YouTube, certainly like, subscribe, and ring the bell. That's 3 things you got to do. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, so that you can be aware of great videos that are coming up on here. Listen, we're here for you. We're here to encourage unity, community, mentorship, and talent growth in the Canadian gospel music industry. And we can only do that if we hear from you. So please drop us a line, send us a message, comment, like, whatever you'd like to do, but let us know how we're doing. And I'm going to stop talking now. So we want to thank you. Have yourself a great week. We will be back next week with a songwriter circle. And if you want to meet some of the artists on the compilation, you tune in next Monday. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Bye.